All right, I think we're live. So welcome everyone to
Not yet.
this new.
Sorry, not yet. I'll just let you know. All right, now you can start. We are live.
Cool. All right, welcome everyone to this new live stream that we have from Product People. So we will give you the opportunity to ask any questions and answer the polls that we have for you today. So you can either scan the QR code that's on the slide here, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code that's written here in the screen. For today, the topic is Beyond HIPPOs, when regulation is your stakeholder. So Joana will talk us through what this is all about. Now, I'm not sure she's going to talk about the actual animal. So yeah, stay tuned and discover what this will be about. I'm personally very curious about this topic. Before I give it over to Joana, let me introduce myself. So I'm Marie. I'm an associate product management consultant at Product People. And before joining Product People, I have some experience in business analysis as well as UX research. So I had the opportunity to work at B2B companies such as FedEx, but also B2C companies and also NGOs. So I had the chance to work with the ocean cleanup team, for example. So this has been really exciting. And these are skills that I can now apply to my job as an associate product manager. Let me also tell you about Product People for those who are not familiar with what we do. So we are an interim product management agency. So we take care of, product operations, but we also support companies in their transformation acceleration. And the way we do this is that we have in-house staff that we staff at our clients. This is how we make money. But of course, we also love to share and to give back to our community. So we have a ton of knowledge from the different industries and the different clients that we work with. So we offer free events such as the live stream that you see today. But we also have offline events. So please make sure to follow us on LinkedIn to stay tuned and know about all the upcoming events in your location. And yeah, we have one of the largest PM communities in Europe with over 50,000 members. So we are very proud of our community and to make it grow. Now, about today's topic, as I said, you can either scan the QR code to answer the poll, or you can enter slido.com and enter the code that you see on the screen. But yeah, we would love to hear from you. And the question that we have for you today is, which regulatory challenge keeps you up at night? Is it A, data privacy and protection? B, financial compliance and reporting? C, environmental sustainability regulations? Or D, AI and all the algorithmic fairness? So I'll give you a minute to answer the poll. And yeah, I'll share the results once they're in. Okay, I see we have some answers coming through already. Let's give it a bit more time. All right, the results are in. So the majority of you answered A, data privacy and protection. And then the rest is quite split between the last three answers. So that's quite an interesting insight. And I see in the messages here, someone mentioned that it should be a multi-select poll, which I guess is a fair comment. Cool. And with that, I would like to leave the floor to Joanna to talk us through her presentation that she has for us today. So I'll let her share her screen.
Thank you so much, Marie. So I can already tell you that I made the best I could to provide kind of a lightweight presentation, because when we're talking about regulation, it's incredibly easy to let things get very heavy very quickly. So this was made with a touch of humor, hopefully, and I will be providing one example which stems directly from my work in the past 2 years. And yes, it is going to be an example about sustainability. Sorry, I won't be discussing GDPR in detail, but I'm happy to address any questions about that as well, if you have them. So we're going to spend some minutes discussing the role of HIPPOs, not your regular HIPPO, but HIPPOs that you can find in regulation. And the idea for this presentation is I will be doing a very brief personal intro. Then we're going to look at what a HIPPO actually is in product management. And then I'm going to narrow down our focus and going to talk a little bit about RegTech or regulatory tech. And then we'll be further focusing our talk on an example from sustainability. You might also have heard about sustainability in recent years as ESG. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. Very briefly, just to explain who I am. As Marie mentioned, so my name is Joanna. In terms of my background, I spent the first 7 years of my career working for the European Union. My last 10 years have been spent in the tech industry, of which the last 7 were specifically in product management. And in the last 3 years, I've also been a product mentor for APMs and junior PMs. In terms of the industries that I've worked in until now, so it's a bit of an even split, I have to say. So there's a bit of travel, utilities, media, maritime, and most recently, RegTech. So it's not the most typical profile that you can find, but it is what it is. So moving on to the concept of the HIPPO. Some of you on this call might be extremely familiar with this snapshot. So this is actually not my work, just to make it clear. This comes from first an article and then an ebook made by Product Board called The Dangerous Animals of Product Management. And you can see here that there are many of them, the HIPPO, or the highest paid person's opinion, being the first. If you're seeing this for the first time, it's, again, a funny read. You can spend some time going through the ebook and maybe you will recognize some of the stereotypes from your daily work as a PM as well. So for today's talk, we're going to be focusing on the HIPPO, not as the highest paid person's opinion, but as possibly the most important person's opinion in the specific case of RegTech. Let's see what that means. So just going from a macro perspective onto a micro perspective. So as PMs, you might be familiar with pestle analysis, which we are oftentimes...
Sorry to interrupt you, but are you sharing your screen?
I am sharing my screen. Is it not visible?
No. Can you maybe share it again?
Okay, I will stop sharing. Can you see it now?
Yeah, now we can see it.
Okay, so you didn't see any of the slides that I shared before?
No.
Okay, that's a shame. Do you want me to restart?
Yeah,
Or
that'd be nice.
okay, then maybe I'll start with the intro. So this is a very brief summary of my working experience thus far. So 7 years working for the EU, an additional 10 years working for the tech industry at large. Of these 10, 7 were spent as a product manager. And in addition to that, the last 3 have also been spent as a product mentor. Are you with me so far? Yes, hopefully. Okay. In terms of the industries I've worked in so far, it's a split between 5 different industries, the most recent of which has been RegTech or regulatory tech. And then coming more towards the topic for today, which is HIPPOs. First off, the concept of HIPPO, I think, was first made popular by first an article and then an ebook by Product Board that tried to provide a brief description of the most common types of stakeholders that you can find as a product manager. The HIPPO being the first that we see here. And HIPPO in this sense stands for the highest paid person's opinion. We're not going to look at HIPPOs in that traditional sense. We're going to see how regulatory authorities can actually also be a HIPPO if you're working in certain kinds of industries as a PM. So just to provide a bit of context, this might also sound familiar. It's the type of analysis that we may be asked to perform as a PM to try and understand better the environment our product is going to be facing, assuming that it's an early stage product. And you can see here the last column is about legislation, the first being about policy. And these two, if you're working in RegTech, this is actually not an even split between the 6. This first and last one tend to have an oversized impact on the kind of decisions you make as a PM. Looking at the different kind of framework, stakeholder mapping, which probably is also familiar to many of you. This is just a simple way to try to map out our stakeholders. And if we were to take this model, the HIPPO would fall here. Basically, you want to be able to anticipate any new regulation that comes in or any changes to the regulation, and you want to try to understand how you can best meet those needs through your product. So how can we further describe this HIPPO? It can show up in many different ways. It is typically all of the things that you see on the screen. So it's the legislator, the executive, the regulator, and can also be law enforcement. If we try to break this down even further, so the legislator would be typically the body that drafts the laws, and that's where you want to start as a PM. You want to be able to look at drafts before they actually become a law. Then there is the executive that ensures that laws come into force and are applied correctly. The regulator is the kind of authority that has to ensure the ongoing correct application of the law. And last but not least, we have law enforcement. And it's important, actually extremely important as a PM, to understand how these 4 are working together so that you can judge, among other things, what is the actual weight that a specific piece of law has at any given time. These are examples of highly regulated industries where this type of HIPPO tends to be of particular importance. So those would be fintech, but also sustainability, healthcare, the energy sector, aviation, pharmaceuticals. And this is not an exhaustive list. You will find other examples as well. And as I had already mentioned, today we're going to look at a specific example from sustainability. So when we talk about RegTech, is also important to make a distinction between RegTech and LegalTech, because these two terms can be used interchangeably, but they actually describe slightly different things. So to put it simply, RegTech would describe an industry that makes products that allow companies to be compliant with a specific law or a set of laws, whereas legal tech is another industry that would typically make products that facilitate the work of lawyers, paralegals, barristers, and other professionals that work in the legal industry. So when we're talking about, and here we're coming more towards a specific example. So when we're talking about HIPPOs, I think one of the most striking examples out there is actually the European Union. So in the European Union, if you look at the different bodies, you can actually see very clearly who is playing which role. So the European Parliament would be the legislator, the European Commission, the executive power. You have different regulators depending on the specific industry that you're trying to assess. And of course, law enforcement typically happens either at member state level or is conducted through the European Court of Justice in more extreme cases. And again, if you're working in product management in one of those industries, you want to pay attention to what is happening in all of these. So if you have to manage this kind of HIPPO, as I already mentioned, one essential thing is to anticipate the needs, because a law is not just a law. And if we look at the specific case of the European Union, laws will typically be published as drafts, and you can read through those, but really you have to be able to count in the innumerous references to other pieces of legislation. It's really a jigsaw puzzle. Then you have to understand the context that a particular law is coming from. Legislation does not happen in a void, and it does not come out of the blue. So each law typically will make specific calls to other legislations. It doesn't matter if it's EU legislation as well. It can also be treaties or other frameworks. And this is why this is in blue. The third point to bear in mind as a PM is that if you're building a product in this kind of context, it is very fair to assume that whatever competitors you may have access to pretty much the same information as you do. Meaning the HIPPO is not the HIPPO at your company. It actually applies to everyone else building a similar product in the same industry. So if we take a very specific example, the set of laws that makes up the sustainable finance package, you might have heard about some of these. They're all laws from the EU. They are applicable to a lot of European companies, including European tech companies, some of them quite well known. I've selected 3 different examples, slightly different, but they're all part of the same package. And I selected them because I have been working with the 3 of them to a lesser or larger extent in the past years. So if we take a look at these, and assuming that each of them might be turned into a digital product, this is what the landscape looks like when we're talking about the number of software providers that made products for compliance with 1, 2, or all 3 of those laws. This is a snapshot from a company called AtlasZero. You can find them at atlaszero.earth. Basically, what they've done is just populate the landscape of the different software providers. And if you were to analyze all of these in more detail, you would see that basically these products fall into one of two categories. So either they offer a process approach, meaning the software works as a project management module, and it's step-by-step compliance, or they've tried to be a bit more, they've tried to innovate to some extent, and then they use an architecture solution that is closer to what might be called a data lake. And that group of companies also tends to talk more in terms of AI-enabled compliance. But if you are a customer to one of these companies, what you will see is basically a piece of software that allows you to be compliant with a particular law that you have to comply with. And the reason why the HIPPO can be so not disturbing, but certainly can shake things up, is because of examples like we are about to face today. So today is January 7th, 2025. And late December last year, just a few weeks ago, the Commission has announced their plans to potentially merge all three of these laws into one, which would then be known as an omnibus. So nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. The timeline for further information is February 2025, late February. And this is actually the perfect example of how you can have a HIPPO, which is not a real person by any means. It is a body, an institution, completely disrupt your nice laid out product management plans. So this is the final piece. It is, if you are operating in one of these industries and compliance and regulation are at the core of what you do, learn to expect the unexpected. And the last slide in this presentation is, if you're interested to ask more questions after this presentation, feel free to scan this. It will take you to my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect and send out any questions or comments that you might have, especially if you had a hard time staying awake during this presentation. So I might improve on it for next time. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Joanna, for the presentation. I'll start sharing my screen again. So yeah, if you have any questions, please, again, feel free to scan the QR code or go on to slido.com and enter the code displayed here. While I let some people kind of share their questions on Slido, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about product people and what are some use cases that companies engage with us. So there are three main use cases that clients come to us for. The most common one is for an interim product manager role. So either to cover a permanent position while they're hiring for a full-time employee, or to cover parental leaves, or if there are any urgent or important initiatives that really need to be addressed right away. The second use case that our clients come to us for is around program management and product operations. So as I said, we have a lot of in-staff employees, a lot of senior with a lot of experience in product management. So we are really able to guide you in upskilling your product management teams and to help you create and streamline processes internally. And the third use case is we can guide you and support you in your transformation acceleration. So be it if you want to shift from sales or tech-led or to product-led, for example, and help you configure your product strategy and help you organize your team structure. So in terms of some clients that we worked for, so we have quite a few B2C clients as well as B2B clients. If you look at all the logos displayed here, you can see it really ranges in terms of industry and in terms of business size. If you are curious about any of these clients, you can read our case studies on our website. And in terms of what the team is composed of, so yeah, we're very proud of our statistics. So far we helped 300 teams across, as I said, very different business sizes. So from Series A startups to really publicly listed companies. We have a growing team of 42 product leaders and product managers. They are in-house and employed full-time, and this really helps us ensure a quality of service for our clients, but we're also accompanying our employees in their career development. And a statistics that personally really made product people very appealing to me as an employer is that there are 62% of women in the team, and the leadership team is comprised of 66% of women. So there is a very strong bias in promoting internally and to attract more women in the tech industry. So yeah, this is something that I am personally very proud of, and this is what attracted me to working with product people. Yeah, so let's look at some questions that have come through. So there is a first one. So how can businesses integrate RegTech and LegalTech solutions to manage regulatory demands while staying innovative and competitive?
Mm-hmm. I think we all remember what, well, not necessarily all of us, but some of us remember what happened when GDPR first came into force. So there was a very serious concern at the time that GDPR would just decimate a lot of businesses, and that, for instance, marketeers would have a much harder time doing their job. And that turned out not to be the case. So with regulation, I'm biased, I think, but my perspective is always that regulation is should be understood as a set of rules to engage with. So there are always ways to continue to do business. The goal is not to prevent you from having a business, but you might have to change some of your practices. So again, going back to the GDPR example, maybe we all grew used to being able to just spam people. And nowadays that's become a lot harder. And probably some of us think that's a good thing. And we have built mechanisms to still be able to reach out to people doing outbound, for instance. So it should not be understood as a death sentence. But you might need some specialized help if you are staring at your business today and you know that a new law is coming into force and you have absolutely no idea how to comply with it.
Mm-hmm. And the next question that we have is, how can product managers balance the need for regulatory compliance with the pressure to innovate and deliver new features quickly?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to answer taking into account the way the EU operates, and I'm fully aware that this might be different in different parts of the world, but the European Union is the example I know best. So you know when something is coming. You have a right to access the pipeline, so to speak, so that you can prepare yourself. And even when a law enters into force, the expectation is not for businesses to become compliant the following day. So there's what's called a grace period that is never less than 6 months and is oftentimes longer than that. So that should give companies the ability to change what needs to be changed. And the other important concept to bear in mind is the size of the company. In Europe, 95% of companies are what's called micro enterprises. So that means companies with 5 or fewer employees, full-time employees. And many of these regulations are not actually applicable to micro enterprises. And even for small and medium enterprises, the burden is usually lighter than for those large corporations. So those are all important aspects to take into account. There's usually no need to panic. Things are not going to come all at once the following day.
And I guess I have one follow-up question on this, because you mentioned, I guess, micro enterprises. So what about micro enterprises who do have to comply to some regulations, but how can they do that without having to extend their resources, which can already be quite limited?
The first thing to do is having it crystal clear what are the actual requirements. I'm going to, again, give GDPR as an example, just because it's easier for everyone to picture it. So larger companies actually need to have a designated officer. It's called an officer, but it's really just an employee that makes sure inside the company that GDPR practices are properly followed and implemented. Smaller companies don't have such an obligation. So you don't need to designate an employee. You still have to delete emails that have been in your CRM for longer than 2 years. But that's something that you can probably, you can probably have a calendar invite that reminds you of doing that. You don't have to necessarily spend company time on it. But again, it goes back to understand the requirements, first thing, and then see exactly how you can fulfill them without using too many resources.
Mm-hmm. And another question that has come through, what are the key challenges companies face in shifting their view of regulatory compliance from a cost center to a strategic enabler?
That's an excellent question. And that's actually the €1 billion question. If we go back, I hope that slide was visible. If we go back to the slide where you can see the hundreds of companies that are all making the same products, the ones that are going to stand out really are the ones that, in addition to compliance, are able to tell companies how to use all of these legislations to become more profitable. And in the case, now I'm going to refer specifically to the case of sustainability. In the case of sustainability, companies that do better, in theory, have access to cheaper capital. So that's the big prize. If your company is able to unwrap this, you have a golden nugget in your hands.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And a final question that we have from the audience is, how should backlog be prioritized in a tight competitive landscape and tough markets like environmental legislation, which seems likely to change anytime?
Yes, maybe I'll start from the end. So legislation can be changed. It's not that easy to change. If we go back to the picture, again, I'm focusing on the European Union. Sorry about that, but that's how it is. The European Union has a fairly well-established process when something needs to change. And it's not that quick, and it's not that easy, and it's usually very well publicized. So if you are afraid that something might change, check the press corner. People will be talking about it, and you will be able to understand beforehand in which direction things are going. Now, backlog prioritization. Prioritization of backlog, I would say, depends on what is your most immediate and urgent goal. Because we can be talking about companies that are very well established and have what seems like unlimited amount of resources. Then their strategy might be, okay, let's focus on a longer term perspective. But if you are a startup and you're operating in this space, sometimes you have to make some very tough calls, and you have to prioritize the items that will ensure you some shorter term cash flow, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And so we mentioned AI earlier in the poll. And one question is, are there any known AI tools that may support the compliance journey that you know of?
Well, like I mentioned, there are many companies out there that have built their entire products in the compliance space using AI. In the sense of they might promise you something as simple as just drop a couple of documents here, give us a few hours, and we will produce the report that proves that you are compliant with legislation XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
So this is already out there in the market. I can't really tell you how accurate it is or how good it is, but it's definitely a space that companies are experimenting a lot with.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess this is one of the trends to watch out for in this space. One last question. Do you have any examples of company that did regulatory compliance really well and managed to turn it into a strategic advantage for sustainable growth?
In the sustainability field or ESG at large, I cannot yet give you an example for this very simple reason that those 3 laws that I have mentioned are still fairly recent. So the overall majority of companies that have to comply with those, they have maybe done their reporting for maybe a year or 2.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, not yet.
Okay.
But if you want to go back to the GDPR example, you might remember a time a few years ago where basically companies that were able to say that they were GDPR compliant, those companies stayed in the European market, and there were plenty that had to exit because they could not figure out how to operate here. So goes both ways.
Yeah. All right. I think that was the last question that we had from the audience. Is there some final words that you would like to share with the audience, or a key takeaway that you would like the audience to remember from your presentation today?
I suppose that would be if you are operating in one or more of these industries, and especially if you have a product that you want to sell to the European market, don't feel discouraged if you feel like the avalanche of regulation is coming your way, because one way or another, you will be able to make it work. It might require some creativity, but it is possible. So stay positive.
Yeah, indeed. That's some nice last positive words, and stay optimistic. That's good. Cool. Thank you so much, Joanna, for your presentation today and for sharing your insights with us. Some last words from me. If you're looking to join us, product people, we are hiring. So you can flash this QR code. You can look at all of our open positions. And yeah, hopefully we might be talking to each other soon. And we also have a newsletter that is going out on a monthly basis. So be sure to scan this QR code if you want to receive some inspiring product stories and some insights. We often share some of our own, lessons and learning. So yeah, feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. Next week, we will have Alice Gregson talking to us about mastering B2B discovery for product success. So be sure to tune in next week, Tuesday at the same time, so 5 p.m. CET. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining us today. You can, of course, follow us in our socials, on LinkedIn, on Meetup. We're also on Telegram, and we have a podcast that you can listen to on Spotify. Yeah, that's all from us. Thank you very much. And I wish you all a good evening or a very nice day. Thanks.